At 3:14 this morning, Eastern Time, a secure email left the headquarters of the United States Chamber of Commerce. The recipients, 6 chief executive officers controlling Fortune 500 companies with a combined market capitalization of $1.2 trillion. The subject line read, Code Red, Tariff Implementation Timeline. What that email contains will determine whether the North American economy survives the next 72 hours intact or collapses into the kind of trade war that destroys industries, eliminates hundreds of thousands of jobs, and reshapes global power for a generation. If you care about what happens when the world's largest economy weaponizes trade policy against its closest ally, subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on notifications because this story is moving in hours, not days, and you need to be in the room when the next shoe drops. I am going to show you that leaked document in exactly 8 minutes. But before I do, you need to understand what triggered it. Because what you are watching unfold right now is not actually about tariffs. It is not even primarily about Canada, despite the 100% threat dominating every headline this morning. This is about whether the United States can still function as the anchor of the global trading system or whether that entire architecture is about to shatter. And here is what almost nobody is telling you. Canada is not the real target. China is playing a completely different game. And the people who understand what is actually happening are panicking. Let me show you why. Let me take you back 7 days. Because what happened over the past week is not a series of random events. It is a carefully orchestrated sequence that brought us to this morning's crisis. And if you do not understand the timeline, you cannot understand what comes next. 7 days ago, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney stepped off a plane in Beijing. This was not a routine diplomatic visit. This was the first time a Canadian head of government had set foot in China in 8 years. 8 years of frozen relations, of diplomatic standoffs, of arrested executives and retaliatory trade barriers. And Carney, who replaced Justin Trudeau just last year, was there to reset the entire relationship. Picture the scene. The Great Hall of the People, Carney sitting across from Chinese President Xi Jinping, and here is the detail that matters. Xi personally greeted Carney at the door. That is rare. That is reserved for leaders China views as strategic partners, not secondary powers. The signal was unmistakable. China was elevating Canada's status deliberately, publicly, as a message to Washington. After hours of closed-door negotiations, they emerged with a deal. 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles entering Canada each year at a 6.1% tariff. In exchange, China slashing tariffs on Canadian canola from 85% down to 15%, eliminating tariffs entirely on lobster, crab, and seafood. Carney called it a landmark agreement, but it was not just economic. It was theatrical humiliation of the United States. Fast forward to 3 days ago, Davos, Switzerland, the World Economic Forum. Carney takes the stage at the Congress Center. The room is packed with world leaders, corporate executives, journalists from every major outlet. And Carney delivers what can only be described as a public divorce announcement from American economic leadership. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition, he tells them. The old order is over. It is not coming back. He does not say Donald Trump's name. He does not have to. Everyone in that room knows exactly who he is talking about. He speaks about coercion by great powers, about using tariffs as leverage, about treating supply chains as vulnerabilities to exploit. And then comes the line that changes everything. If we are not at the table, we are on the menu. The audience gives him a standing ovation. Not polite applause, a standing ovation, in a room where American business leaders and European officials have spent the past year watching Trump threaten allies, demand territory from Denmark, and treat trade agreements as negotiable suggestions. Carney is saying what they have all been thinking, but nobody would say publicly. The next day, Trump takes the stage. His speech is vintage Trump, rambling, self-congratulatory, filled with threats. He talks about Greenland again. He mocks unnamed foreign leaders, and then he gets to Canada. Quote, Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements, end quote. It is personal, it is dismissive, the kind of rhetoric that might have intimidated previous Canadian leaders into backing down, but Carney does not back down. He responds publicly, Canada does not live because of the United States. Canada thrives because it is Canadian, because of Canadian values, Canadian democracy, Canadian strength. That refusal to bend triggers what happens next. Trump withdraws his invitation for Carney to join something called the Board of Peace, a vaguely defined vanity project with a $1 billion price tag for membership. Then come the social media posts, attacking Carney, attacking the China deal, attacking Canada for being ungrateful. And then this morning, the threat. 100% tariffs if Canada moves forward with the China agreement. Now, here is where most coverage is getting this story completely wrong. The conventional analysis says Trump is angry at Carney for the Davos speech. He is retaliating. He is punishing Canada for daring to criticize him. And yes, there is an element of personal pique here. Trump does not handle defiance well. We all know this. But that analysis misses the entire strategic picture. Because the 100% tariff threat is not primarily about wounded pride, it is about three things mainstream media is not telling you. First, this is not about electric vehicles. The surface issue is 49,000 Chinese cars entering Canada. The real issue is precedent. Can allies of the United States independently make trade agreements with China without Washington's permission? If Canada wins this fight, Mexico follows. Then the European Union, then Japan. The entire framework of American leverage over allied trade policy collapses. Second, everyone is focused on the July 1st review of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. That is a decoy. The real deadline is February 15th. 8 days from now, congressional vote on trade promotion authority. Trump needs a quick, visible win to show strength before that vote. He cannot wait until July. The timing of this crisis is not coincidental. It is calculated. Third, and this is what nobody is saying out loud, Mark Carney wants this fight. This is not an accidental confrontation. This is campaign strategy. Carney is positioning himself as the leader who stood up to the bully. Polling shows 68% of Canadians support resisting American pressure. He is building his political brand on defiance. The China deal, the Davos speech, the public responses to Trump's threats, none of this is reactive. It is deliberate. Which brings us to why Trump cannot back down. He is trapped. His MAGA base expects dominance. They expect foreign leaders to submit when threatened. Backing down makes him look weak, but following through triggers economic catastrophe. The United States imports $437 billion in goods from Canada every year. 35 states depend on Canadian energy. Auto supply chains cross the border 6 to 8 times per single vehicle during production. Imposing 100% tariffs does not punish Canada. It destroys American industries. So Trump has engineered a situation where any move hurts him. Back down, lose credibility. Follow through, cause a recession. And while he is trapped in this bind, his own business allies are in open revolt. Which brings us back to that 3 a.m. email. Because while Trump is threatening Canada publicly, corporate America is panicking privately. And what they told him in that message changes everything. Let me show you what they said. Before I show you that document, I need you to do something. Smash that like button right now if you are realizing this is significantly bigger than you thought when you clicked on this video. Because what I am about to reveal is not speculation. This email was not leaked exclusively to me. It was leaked to 3 major outlets simultaneously this morning. The Wall Street Journal has it, Bloomberg has it, Reuters has it. And the reason it went to all 3 at once tells you everything you need to know about the people who sent it. They want the public to see this. They want you to understand that corporate America, the people who bankroll campaigns, the people who sit in boardrooms and control supply chains and employ millions of workers, they are terrified of what happens next. Here is what that email contains. 3 specific things that should alarm everyone paying attention. First, a timeline. 72 hours to reverse course before, quote, irreversible damage to North American manufacturing, end quote. Second, a threat. If Trump proceeds, these chief executives will publicly oppose him, not privately, not through back channels, publicly. That is unprecedented. These are people who spent decades avoiding political confrontation. And third, a warning. Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania will pay the immediate price. Those 3 states, the states that gave Trump his electoral margin in 2024, the states he cannot afford to lose in 2028. Let me walk you through who signed this email and why they are panicking, because what you are about to hear explains why the next 72 hours determine everything. The United States Chamber of Commerce represents 3 million businesses across America. It is historically Republican-aligned. For decades, it has been one of the most reliable institutional supporters of free market policies and business-friendly trade agreements, which is why what happened this morning is so significant. For the first time in its modern history, the Chamber is openly opposing a sitting president on trade policy, and they are not doing it quietly. The email begins like this. Mr. President, implementation of 100% tariffs on Canadian goods will trigger immediate supply chain collapse across 17 industries, not disruption, collapse. That word choice is deliberate. These are people who understand the difference between temporary adjustment and systemic breakdown, and they are using the language of catastrophe. Then they get specific. Auto sector, 250,000 jobs at risk in the first 90 days. Not eventually, the first 90 days. General Motors has already run the numbers. 14 assembly plants on standby to close if parts from Canada stop flowing. Ford has 7 to 10 days of inventory. After that, production stops. Why? Because modern auto manufacturing operates on just-in-time inventory systems. There are no warehouses full of backup parts. The parts arrive hours before they are installed. Break that flow, everything halts. Energy sector, $47 per barrel price spike. Immediate. The United States imports 60% of its crude oil from Canada, 4.8 million barrels per day. You cannot replace that overnight. Refineries are calibrated for Canadian heavy crude. Switching to different suppliers requires months of retooling. In the meantime, gasoline prices hit $4.20 per gallon nationally. And here is the political problem. That happens before the February 15th vote. Agriculture, $12 billion in retaliatory Canadian tariffs targeting American corn, wheat, and dairy. Why those products? Because they come from politically strategic states. Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Farm Belt states that vote Republican. Canada is not choosing those targets randomly. They are engineered for maximum political pain. Then comes paragraph 2 of the email, the part that turns this from economic analysis into political threat. Quote, enclosed electoral impact analysis for 8 swing states, end quote. They ran the numbers. Michigan, 47,000 auto workers in union households. Pennsylvania, energy sector backlash across 3 congressional districts. Wisconsin, dairy exports to Canada collapse, affecting 12 counties that flipped to Trump in 2024. Arizona, copper imports disrupted. Georgia, poultry processing dependent on Canadian feed. Nevada, construction materials price spike. The list continues. And then the punchline. These states gave you your electoral margin in 2024. They will cost you in 2028. That is not analysis. That is a warning. Vote totals, electoral college math. They are telling the president that this policy does not just hurt the economy. It destroys his political future. Paragraph 3 is where it becomes an ultimatum. We respectfully request a 72-hour pause for negotiation. The signatories, Chief Executive Officer of General Motors, Chief Executive Officer of Ford, Chief Executive Officer of ExxonMobil, 3 others whose names I cannot confirm, but multiple sources say include major manufacturing and retail executives, and then the final line. If this proceeds, we cannot remain silent. Read that again. We cannot remain silent. That is corporate speak for we will publicly campaign against you. These are people who write 7-figure checks to Republican campaigns. They are threatening to withdraw support, not privately, publicly, in an election cycle. That is the nuclear option in corporate political strategy. Now, why did this email leak, and why did it leak to 3 outlets simultaneously? I have 3 theories, and all 3 might be true. Theory 1, corporate insurance. They know Trump is likely to ignore this, so they are creating a public record. When the crisis hits, when factories close and gas prices spike, they will say we warned him. We tried to stop this. It is documented. That protects them legally and politically. Theory 2, pressure campaign. Once this email is public, the MAGA base sees it as elites versus Trump. That forces Trump into a choice. Side with business or side with the base. It is a trap. Either choice weakens him. Back corporate America, betray the populist brand, defy corporate America, trigger economic collapse that voters blame him for. Theory 3, and this is where it gets interesting, coordinated with Carney. Look at the timing of that email. It was sent 4 hours after the Davos speech. 4 hours. That is not coincidence. That is coordination. Someone told those chief executives exactly when to move. And the most likely candidate is someone in Carney's circle signaling that Canada was committed to this fight and that corporate America needed to choose sides immediately, which brings us to the player nobody is talking about, the one actor in this entire crisis who has said absolutely nothing. And that silence is the most terrifying part of this entire situation. China has not issued a single official statement in 48 hours. No foreign ministry comment, no Global Times editorial, no response whatsoever. And if you understand how Beijing operates, that silence is not absence. It is strategy. There is an old saying, when your enemy is self-destructing, do not interrupt. That is exactly what China is doing right now. While Trump threatens Canada, while corporate America panics, while the entire North American trading system teeters on collapse, Beijing is sitting back and watching. Because no matter what happens next, China wins. If Trump backs down, American credibility collapses. If Trump follows through, economic chaos benefits Chinese manufacturing. If Canada holds firm, it sets a precedent for every other ally to break with Washington. But China is not just watching. They are moving quietly, strategically. And what they are doing while everyone focuses on the Canada crisis is brilliant and absolutely terrifying. Let me show you what the next 72 hours look like if Trump pulls this trigger. I have war gamed the first 72 hours if Trump implements this tariff, hour by hour. What follows is not speculation. This is based on how markets operate, how supply chains function, and how political pressure builds when economic pain becomes visible. Stay with me because this gets catastrophic fast. Hour zero, the moment Trump announces implementation. Asian futures markets are open. They react first. S&P 500 futures drop 400 points in 6 minutes. The Canadian dollar collapses 8% against the US dollar. That is the largest single-day currency move in Canadian history. Why? Algorithmic trading systems detect the announcement and execute immediate sell orders. No human decision-making, just programmed panic. Hour two, Tokyo markets open. The Nikkei drops 3.2% at the bell. Seoul drops 2.8%. Why are Japanese and Korean markets collapsing over a Canada tariff? Because 40% of their auto parts exports flow through North American supply chains. If those chains break, Mazda, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, all of them face production shutdowns. The contagion spreads instantly. Hour four, European markets open. London, Frankfurt, Paris, all down 2% or more. Volkswagen, BMW, Stellantis, every major European automaker with North American operations watches their stock price crater. Why? Because they source components from Canada. They assemble vehicles in Mexico using Canadian parts. The entire integrated production system depends on frictionless border crossings. Impose 100% tariffs and the whole thing seizes. Hour six, Wall Street opens. The Dow Jones drops 700 points in the first 90 seconds of trading. General Motors falls 12%. Ford falls 15%. Circuit breakers trigger, halting trading temporarily to prevent total collapse. ExxonMobil drops 8% on fears of crude oil supply disruption. In 6 hours, $2.3 trillion in market capitalization has evaporated. That is more than the entire annual gross domestic product of Canada. But the market panic is just the beginning. The real crisis starts when supply chains actually seize. Hour eight, General Motors announces 14 plants on standby to close. Not someday. Today. Ford says part shortage is imminent. They have 7 to 10 days of inventory. After that, assembly lines go dark. Why? Just-in-time manufacturing. There are no warehouses full of backup Canadian parts. When the border closes, production stops. Hour 12. Energy markets spike. West Texas Intermediate crude hits $98 per barrel. It was at $76 yesterday. Gasoline prices hit $4.20 per gallon as a national average. Refineries cannot switch suppliers overnight. They are calibrated for Canadian heavy crude. Retooling takes months. In the meantime, American drivers pay. Hour 16, Walmart and Target issue statements. Price increases coming on lumber, paper products, aluminum, anything sourced from Canada. Consumers see it immediately. Hour 24, Michigan governor holds emergency press conference. Mr. President, you are destroying our economy. Ohio senators, both Republican and Democrat, signed bipartisan letter demanding immediate reversal. The political pressure is building, but we are only 24 hours in. This is where it gets worse. Let me be very clear about what is at stake here. This is not just about one trade dispute or one tariff threat. What we are watching is 3 irreversible consequences unfolding simultaneously. First, economic precedent. If the United States successfully weaponizes interdependence against its closest ally, that becomes normalized. Every future trade dispute, every policy disagreement, every moment of tension defaults to tariff threats. The stable, predictable trading relationships that allowed companies to invest billions in cross-border supply chains, those disappear. You cannot build a factory in Mexico if you think the president might impose 100% tariffs next year because he is angry about immigration. Investment stops, growth stops, the entire model breaks. Second, alliance collapse. If Trump forces Canada into submission, the message to every other ally is unmistakable. Your sovereignty is conditional. Your trade policy requires Washington's approval. Your agreements with other countries can be vetoed by American threats. And if Washington is willing to do this to Canada, the country it shares the world's longest undefended border with, what will it do to Japan, to South Korea, to Germany? Every ally starts calculating, we need alternatives. We cannot depend on American stability. That is how NATO fractures. That is how the entire post-war alliance system unravels. Third, China's victory. Beijing does not need to win this confrontation. It just needs to watch the United States lose allies. Every fractured partnership, every country that decides it cannot trust American commitments, That is an opportunity for China to step in. This is how empires end, not through military defeat, through isolation, through allies deciding the costs of partnership exceed the benefits. So here is my prediction. I am assigning probabilities because I want you to hold me accountable when we see how this resolves. 60% probability Trump announces a pause for negotiation within 72 hours. He claims victory, says Canada agreed to review the China deal. Reality, it is a face-saving retreat. Canada makes minor cosmetic adjustments. Trump declares success. The tariffs never actually get implemented. Cost, American credibility is damaged. Allies see that threats are negotiable. The leverage weakens. 30% probability, tariffs get implemented briefly. 72 hours of economic pain. Markets collapse. Corporate pressure becomes unbearable. Trump reverses course and blames deep state sabotage or Republican in name only traitors in Congress. Cost, recession plus political crisis heading into the February 15th vote. 10% probability, full escalation, tariffs stay, Canada retaliates. Mexico gets pulled in. The United States-Mexico-Canada agreement collapses by July. Cost, everything. Great Depression-level economic disruption, complete realignment of global trade, American isolation. Now, I have 3 questions for you, and I genuinely want your answers in the comments. First, do you think corporate chief executives can actually influence Trump at this point, or is that leverage completely dead? Second, if you are Canadian, would you accept Trump's terms to avoid economic pain, or would you support Carney standing firm regardless of cost? Third, is this the actual moment American global leadership ends? Or am I overreacting to what is ultimately just another Trump negotiating tactic? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm reading every single one because I want to know if I am missing something here. Subscribe to this channel right now because the February 15th vote is 8 days away. When that vote happens, I will break down exactly what it means for trade policy, for presidential authority, for the entire global economic system. Turn on notifications. This story is moving faster than traditional news cycles can process. By the time cable news figures out what happened, the next crisis is already unfolding. Share this video with someone who thinks tariffs are boring economic policy. Show them why this matters. Show them what 72 hours of trade war actually looks like in practice. The countdown started this morning. By the time you watch this tomorrow, we will know whether the world's most important trade partnership survives or collapses entirely. I will see you in the next breakdown. Stay alert.